There's a pattern most men learn to ignore until it costs them something they cannot get back. It starts small: a text message left unanswered for 3 hours that somehow occupies his mind for 3 days. A dinner conversation where he watches his own words before they leave his mouth, calibrating each sentence to avoid tension he cannot name. A moment in bed where he realizes he's performing affection he doesn't fully feel, going through motions that once came naturally but now arrive as duty. These moments accumulate quietly, like sediment at the bottom of a river, until one day he looks at his reflection and doesn't recognize the face he sees. Not because he's aged, but because something essential has drained from behind his eyes. He still goes to work, he still answers her calls, he still laughs at appropriate times, but there's a heaviness now, a kind of spiritual exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. He cannot explain it to his friends because he doesn't have the language for it. He cannot explain it to her because to do so would require admitting something he's been trained never to say aloud, that the very relationship he worked so hard to build has become the architecture of his own diminishment. I work with men who come to me with this exact feeling, successful men often, men with careers, with options, with intelligence, but somewhere along the way, they made a single navigational error so subtle they didn't notice it happening. They placed a woman at the center of their psychological universe and built everything else around her: their schedule, their emotional state, their sense of worth, their daily mood. And now, months or years later, they sit across from me describing a life that feels like it belongs to someone else. They describe waking up and immediately checking their mood before they know their own. They describe canceling plans with friends not because she asked, but because they've learned to anticipate her disappointment. They represent a strange paralysis, where even small decisions, which restaurant, which movie, which weekend plans, feel heavy with consequence, as if one wrong choice will confirm something terrible they cannot yet name. What they don't realize, what they cannot see from inside the pattern, is that she's already confirmed it. Not through words, but through a slow, almost imperceptible withdrawal of respect that registers in 1,000 micro-behaviors they're too close to decode. Seneca understood this mechanism 2,000 years ago, writing from the heart of imperial Rome, watching men destroy themselves not through vice or violence, but through a kind of spiritual kneeling that began the moment they handed their self-governance to someone else. He lived in a world of gladiators and emperors, of men who projected power publicly while privately dissolving into dependence on lovers, on approval, on external validation that could be withdrawn at any moment. And what he observed with the surgical clarity that comes from watching the empire from the inside was this: a man who requires another person's presence to feel whole has already lost the only battle that matters, not the struggle for her affection, the battle for his own sovereignty. Seneca called it tranquillitas, a kind of inner steadiness that cannot be moved by external circumstance, a fortress built not from stone, but from disciplined attention to what actually belongs to you. And in his letters, again and again, he returns to one devastating truth. The moment you make your peace dependent on another person's variable state, you have exiled yourself from your own life. You are no longer living. You are petitioning. Here is the thesis that runs beneath everything that follows, the single line that explains why so many modern men feel like strangers in their own relationships. A man who organizes his life around a woman's emotional weather slowly becomes the kind of man no weather can respect. Not because women are cruel, but because respect, absolute respect, the kind that sustains desire and partnership, flows only toward men who remain unmoved by the chaos she sometimes needs to express. She doesn't want a man who absorbs her storms. She wants a man who stands steady while she moves through them. A man whose frame is strong enough that her emotional turbulence doesn't require him to abandon his own center. But the modern man has been taught the opposite. He's been taught that love means merging, that intimacy means constant availability, that being a good partner means making her feelings his primary responsibility. And so he does exactly that. He wakes up and checks her text tone before he checks his own state. He plans his day around her schedule. He monitors her mood and adjusts his behavior accordingly, trying to be the man she needs in each moment, shape-shifting to avoid conflict, smoothing every edge, apologizing for things he didn't do wrong and doesn't understand. And in doing this, in this relentless campaign to keep her happy, to keep the peace, to prove his commitment, he commits the one unforgivable error Seneca warned about. He abandons his post. He vacates his own sovereignty. And she feels it before he does. Watch what happens in the body. A man comes home from work, and before his coat is off, he's scanning her face. Is she upset? Is something wrong? Did he forget something? The day he just lived, the meetings, the problems he solved, the small victories, all of it, evaporates the moment he enters her emotional field. His nervous system recalibrates around her state. If she's warm, he exhales. If she's cold, he contracts. He doesn't notice he's doing this because it happens below conscious awareness, in the same autonomic systems that regulate breathing. But over time, this recalibration becomes his baseline. He loses access to his own emotional ground. He becomes a tuning fork that vibrates only to her frequency. And here's what Seneca understood that most modern relationship advice completely misses. This isn't intimacy. This is dissolution. Intimacy requires two sovereign beings choosing to connect. What this man is offering isn't connection. It's energetic kneeling, a constant low-grade plea for her approval, for her good mood, for her validation that he's doing it right. And the brutal paradox Seneca identified in letter after letter is that the moment a man begins to need validation, he becomes constitutionally incapable of receiving it, because validation only lands on a man who doesn't need it. Approval only sticks to a man who can afford its absence. The collapse happens in stages, though the man experiencing it rarely sees the progression until much later. At first, he thinks he's being considerate. She mentions she doesn't like it when he stays out late with friends, and he adjusts, not because she demanded it, but because he wants her to feel secure. She seems distant after he spends Sunday afternoon working on a personal project, so he stops. Not because she forbids it, but because her distance feels like punishment, and avoiding that distance feels like wisdom. She comments on his gym routine, taking time away from them, and slowly, over weeks, the gym visits decrease. None of these changes happens through overt control. She's not a villain in this story. She's simply doing what people do, expressing preferences, reacting to what feels good or uncomfortable. But the man hears these preferences as instructions, and because he's made her happiness his mission, he recalibrates his entire life around them. Seneca would call this servitus, voluntary slavery, the worst kind, because the chains are invisible and self-imposed. The man believes he's choosing this. He thinks he's mature, selfless, and a good partner. What he doesn't see is that each small abandonment of his own structure is a withdrawal from the account of her respect. Each time he shifts to accommodate her mood, he confirms something she doesn't want to believe, that he has no frame of his own, that her pressure determines his shape, that he can be moved. I once spoke to a man who described it perfectly without realizing what he was describing. He said, "I just want her to be happy. If she's happy, I'm happy." And I asked him, "What were you before you met her?" He looked confused. I asked again, "What was your life organized around before she became the organizing principle?" He sat with that for a long time. Then he said, "I don't remember." That's the moment of recognition, the moment Seneca would call the beginning of philosophy. When a man realizes he's been living someone else's life, authored by someone else's emotional needs. He cannot remember the last time he moved from his own center. This is the mechanism of the collapse. It's not that she takes his life from him. It's that he offers it piece by piece, thinking this is what love requires. He spends his mornings immediately checking her messages. He gives his evenings by structuring them around her availability. He offers his friendship by slowly deprioritizing the men who knew him before. He gives his mission that quiet, burning thing that once pulled him out of bed by relegating it to someday, after her needs are met, after the relationship is stable, after she feels secure. But her security never comes, because security for a woman doesn't come from a man's availability. It comes from his inability to collapse. It comes from sensing that no matter what storm she brings, no matter what test she runs, he remains unmoved at his core. Not cold, not distant, but unmoved. Still himself, still sovereign. What the man doesn't understand, what Seneca tried to teach the young men of Rome, is that this pattern doesn't end in gratitude. It ends in contempt. Not conscious contempt, not cruelty, but something deeper and more devastating. A quiet loss of attraction that she cannot explain and he cannot fix. Because once a woman sees that a man will abandon himself to keep her, she loses the one thing that made him desirable in the first place. She loses weight, his gravity, the sense that he exists independent of her validation, that he has somewhere to go and something to do that doesn't require her presence. I've watched this play out in 100 variations. The man who texts too much, who fills every silence, who cannot tolerate her absence without reaching out. The man who apologizes reflexively, who takes responsibility for her emotional state even when it has nothing to do with him. The man who stops leading, who defers every decision to her preference, who treats her moods as legislation he must obey. And in every case the same result, she begins to pull away. Not because she's cold or ungrateful, but because something in her, something older than culture, older than language, recognizes that this man will not hold her. He will collapse under her weight, and so she begins, unconsciously, to test harder. She escalates emotion, not to punish him, but to find the flaw, to find the place where he'll stop accommodating and start standing. And when he doesn't, when he keeps bending, keeps explaining, keeps trying to make her happy, she withdraws completely. Not in a day, over months. Slowly, until the bedroom goes cold, until conversations become logistics, until he realizes he's living with someone who looks at him the way you look at furniture, present, functional, but utterly uninteresting. Now zoom out from the individual man and see the broader system that makes this pattern almost inevitable. We live in a moment where masculine initiative has been reframed as aggression, where approach is read as threat, where the very act of stating what you want as a man carries social and legal risk. Dating apps have turned courtship into a marketplace where women control access and men compete for selection, often by performing endless availability, endless emotional labor, and endless patience. Social media has created an attention economy where a woman in a relationship still receives daily validation from dozens or hundreds of other men. In contrast, the man beside her competes with an invisible chorus that never stops singing. Divorce law in most Western nations is structured such that marriage represents for men a catastrophic legal risk with minimal upside. Custody defaults to the mother. Assets are split regardless of who built them. And the accusation alone, true or false, can end a man's career, his reputation, his access to his children. I say this not to inspire bitterness, but to name the reality. Modern men exist in a framework that punishes masculine certainty and rewards feminine variability. The system tells him to be vulnerable, to communicate, to share his feelings, and then watches coldly as that vulnerability is used against him in family court, in HR meetings, in social exile. Seneca would recognize this immediately. He lived in a similar moment, the late stage of Roman imperial power, when men had lost the clarity of purpose that built the empire and began to decay into luxury, distraction, and emotional dependence on validation they could not control. He wrote in On the Shortness of Life that most men do not live, they exist, moved by circumstance, by opinion, by the expectations of others, never once asking what they themselves actually want, what they themselves are willing to tolerate. The cost of ignoring this is not dramatic. It's not a sudden collapse. It's a slow erosion, a quiet diminishment that happens while you're busy being considerate. You wake up one day and realize you haven't had a conversation with a male friend in months. You acknowledge your hobbies have become theoretical, things you used to do, things you'll get back to someday. You realize you cannot remember the last time you felt genuinely excited about your own day, your own projects, your own future. Everything has become context for the relationship. Your mood is her mood. Your plans are her plans. Your energy is spent managing her emotional state, anticipating her needs, and avoiding conflicts that might reveal you have needs of your own. And the cruelest part, the part Seneca would want you to see clearly, is that she doesn't respect this. She may appreciate it in the abstract. She may say she wants a man who listens, who cares, who's present. But what she responds to, what her body and her deeper instincts react to, is the man who remains himself even when she's in a storm. The man who listens but doesn't absorb. The man who cares but doesn't collapse. The man who's present but not infinitely available. Because that man, the man who holds his center, offers something she cannot generate alone, a frame strong enough to relax inside. And without that frame, the relationship becomes a kind of mutual exhaustion, two people trying to hold each other up with nothing solid beneath them. If a system offers you no protection, withdrawal is not a weakness, it's clear. If the rules are written so that your vulnerability is weaponized, your commitment is punished, and your presence is taken for granted, absence becomes the only language that registers. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." The modern man craves her validation, her approval, her consistent warmth, and because he craves it, he is poor. He is dependent. He has given her a power she never asked for and cannot safely hold, the power to determine his worth. The sovereign man, the man who has internalized what Seneca spent a lifetime teaching, does not crave. He offers his presence as a gift, not a guarantee. He remains available to connect, but is not desperate for it. He knows that her response does not determine his value, and paradoxically, it is only this man, the man who does not need her validation, who becomes capable of receiving her genuine respect. Here is what practical sovereignty looks like, not as a list, but as a way of moving through the world. Notice when you're about to change your plans to accommodate her mood. Pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it serves both of us or because I'm afraid of her disappointment? If it's the latter, hold your plan. Let her be disappointed, not to punish her, but to teach both of you that her emotions are not legislation, that you can care about her deeply without making her feelings your master. When she brings chaos, and she will bring chaos, because that's how feminine energy sometimes expresses itself, refuse the urge to fix it, to solve it, to absorb it into your own nervous system. Sit with her, listen, but do not take ownership of her storm. Let her feel it fully while you remain steady. This is not coldness, this is the gift of a frame. She doesn't need you to fix her. She needs you not collapse under her. Stop explaining yourself. Stop defending your decisions as if her approval is required for them to be valid. Make a decision. Execute it. If she objects, hear her. Consider her perspective, but do not automatically defer. Let there be tension. Let there be disagreement. Let her see that your shape does not change just because she applies pressure. This, more than any words, is the communication that matters. Allow her to react. She may be angry. She may withdraw. She may test harder. Do not chase. Do not over-explain. Do not flood her with reassurance. Let her move through her reaction while you remain unmoved at your core. What you're teaching her, what you're teaching yourself, is that love does not require fusion, that connection does not require you to abandon your post. Return to your mission, not someday. Today, that project you set aside, that training routine you paused, that friendship you've been meaning to resurrect, that skill you wanted to build, pick one and begin again. Not because it will make her respect you, though it will, but because a man without a mission is a man waiting for instructions, and no one respects a man who's waiting. Build your day such that her absence is noticeable but not catastrophic. If your entire emotional state collapses when she's cold or distant, you've built your house on sand. Seneca wrote to Lucilius, "The wise man is self-sufficient, not that he wishes to be without friends, but that he can be." This is the architecture of sovereignty. You can love deeply, you can invest fully, but your foundation must be yours alone when she sees that you have somewhere to go, something that pulls you out of bed independent of her validation. something in her relaxes, because now she's not responsible for your entire emotional economy. Now you're a man, not a project. Protect your time with the same ferocity you'd protect your money. If you give her unlimited access to your schedule, your attention, and our presence, you teach her that your time has no value. Scarcity is not manipulation, it's honesty. You have limited hours, spend them wisely. And when you do give her your time, give it entirely not as background noise while you scroll, but as actual presence. This is the paradox. The less available a man becomes, the more valuable when present. See the two paths clearly now. Path 1, you ignore this. You continue to build your life around her mood, her needs, her validation. 5 years from now, you're smaller. Not because she drained you, but because you offered yourself as fuel and there's nothing left to burn. Your friendships have atrophied. Your body has softened. Your mission, if you ever had one, is a ghost you sometimes remember late at night. The relationship, if it still exists, is hollow, more habit than desire, more obligation than choice. She stays, maybe, but with one foot out the door, one eye on the exit, one part of her constantly scanning for the man you used to be or the man you never became. Or she leaves, and when she does, you'll have nothing to return to, because you built everything around her, and when she's gone, the structure collapses. You'll date again, maybe, but you'll bring the same pattern to the next woman, and she'll sense it immediately, that neediness, that void where your center should be, that hunger for her to make you whole. And the cycle repeats, only now you're older, more bitter, more confused about why this keeps happening. Path 2, you take this as initiation. You recognize that everything you've been taught about relationships and masculine values has been designed to make you a better servant, not a sovereign man. You begin to pull your energy back from her emotional weather and reinvest it in your own foundation. You rebuild your structure, your body, your mission, your friendships, your solitude. You stop treating her validation as oxygen and start treating it as weather, nice when it comes, irrelevant to your survival when it doesn't. This path is more challenging at first. She may escalate when she realizes you're no longer controllable through her moods. She may leave, and that loss will hurt. But 5 years down this path, you're different. Quieter, maybe, fewer people in your life, but the ones who remain are solid. Your work has depth because you had uninterrupted time to build it. Your body is a tool you've maintained, not a thing you've neglected. You sleep well because you're not constantly monitoring someone else's emotional state. And women, they respond differently now, not because you've learned techniques, but because you move differently. You no longer lean, you no longer petition, you offer and withdraw without apology. The women who stay are the ones who can meet you at that level, who don't need you to collapse to feel powerful. And the women who leave, they leave faster, which is a gift, because you're no longer wasting years on connections that require you to be less than you are. Seneca spent his life teaching one lesson in 1,000 forms, that freedom is internal, that the only cage that matters is the one you build in your own mind. That sovereignty is not the absence of connection, but the refusal to make connection a condition of your wholeness. He wrote this from exile, from the court of Nero, from the center of wealth and power, and the message never changed. You are responsible for your own state, not your circumstances, not her mood, not the unfairness of the system. Your state, your center, your capacity to remain yourself when everything around you is chaos. This is not a call to isolation. It's not a call to bitterness. It's a call to build yourself so solidly that love becomes a choice, not a need, that her presence is additive, not fundamental, that you can lose everything external and still have the one thing no one can take, your own self-governance. The truth you've been avoiding is not that she doesn't love you. It's that you've made her responsible for your emotional survival, and that responsibility kills desire. She cannot desire a man she has to mother. She cannot respect a man who dissolves under her pressure. She does not kill your purpose. She reflects its absence. Every time she withdraws and you feel that panic, that emptiness, that collapse, what you're feeling is not her cruelty. You're feeling the void where your mission should be, the hollowness where your self-possession should live. And until you reclaim that, until you rebuild your life such that her absence is painful but not catastrophic, you will keep repeating this pattern with every woman you meet. If this reaches something in you that you've been trying not to see, share it with the men in your life who need to hear it. Subscribe and keep this work moving, because the men who ignore this will learn it the hard way, and by then the cost is almost always more than they can afford. A man who cannot stand alone will eventually be left standing nowhere.